Before running for president of the United States, Donald Trump was almost universally adored. The billionaire real estate mogul had friends across political, minority, and international lines. And he was even asked to run for president by many of the same establishments that oppose him today. So what changed? How did Trump go from being adored to despised seemingly overnight? Is there truth to the overwhelming amount of negative mainstream media coverage? Or could there be a nefarious political agenda behind it all? Trump Debunked Part 1, MSM Trumps Up Controversy.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Edge of Wonder. We're your hosts. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rob. You guys, Trump gets a lot of bad press. In fact, nearly every article from the mainstream media seems to paint President Trump in a bad light. And we kept thinking, why is that? Is there truth to their reporting? Or are they twisting facts or leaving things out to fit a political narrative?
Well, this is what we will find out in this episode by diving into some scandals that have rocked Trump's presidency. And just to note, we want to be as objective as we possibly can here for this episode.
This episode will be much less about our opinion on these things and much more about the factual evidence to back up our reasoning. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Back in 2017, there was the Meals on Wheels scandal, which was one of the first scandals to hit the Trump administration. A Forbes article shed light on this controversy and pointed to the Trump administration's budget blueprint.
The budget was a proposed plan on how and where the government should effectively spend money.
This article said, quote, "Criticism is fine and necessary. However, there is a tendency for people who oppose Trump, and sadly for journalists covering the administration, to jump into every utterance and decision with, as a public policy spinal tap think tank would say, the dial turned up to 11. A clear example is the claim in some media outlets that the proposed budget would kill Meals on Wheels," unquote.
It also said, but the situation is complicated, and saying that the budget eliminates the Meals on Wheels program is factually incorrect.
Forbes pointed out that only about 3.3% of Meals on Wheels funding even comes from government sources, and government grants are actually the 5th largest source of revenue for Meals on Wheels.
Eliminating this small portion of funding wouldn't just make Meals on Wheels disappear overnight. Does it create a challenge for them? Sure. But it doesn't seem to be the catastrophic event the media paint it to be.
Like this HuffPost article did, titled #LetThemDie, Heartless Donald Trump Blasted for Slashing Meals on Wheels Funds. The article was actually pretty short. It showed tweets of people blasting Trump more than it did anything else.
The article pointed out how President Trump was criticized for proposing a budget that includes cutting funding for the Meals on Wheels programs. It highlighted how Meals on Wheels provides meals to the elderly, the poor, veterans, and disabled people.
According to the New York Times, under the proposed budget, the Department of Housing and Urban Development's entire $3 billion community development block grant program would be eliminated, which includes grants to the Meals on Wheels program.
But this reporting was misleading, because as the Forbes article pointed out, only about 3% of funding for Meals on Wheels come from government funding.
Now, according to Forbes, 35% of funding for the Meals on Wheels program comes from federal sources. However, those sources are not what Trump's budget included in eliminating.
The Meals on Wheels umbrella organization only receives 3.3% of its funding through the Community Development Block Grant Program. So if that program were cut like the budget proposed, the Meals on Wheels would only lose 3.3% of its funding. Not all of its funding, like many news outlets are suggesting.
So I guess the question is, why? Why cut any of the budget for Meals on Wheels? Well, I guess when you inherit a national debt of nearly $25 trillion, you have to make some tough decisions and try to correct that. But of course, we don't know for sure.
One thing is clear though, it doesn't seem from this that President Trump was just trying to kill the elderly by cutting 3% of the Community Development Block grant program. The mainstream media's story, however, managed to convince many people that this was exactly what he was trying to do.
In 2015, during Trump's presidential campaign, reports said he mocked the disability of New York Times reporter Sergei Kovaleski. The claims came after Trump flailed his arms around as he emphasized how Kovaleski was flustered when he went back on a statement he made regarding the 9/11 attacks.
Sergei Kovaleski has a congenital condition called arthrogryposis, which causes restrictive movement in the joints.
Now, Trump was on ABC News talking with George Stephanopoulos, who brought this up to him. Trump said he remembered reports from 2001 of many Arab Americans celebrating the 9/11 attack on rooftops in New Jersey.
Hey, I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering.
Now, after George questioned Trump about this, ABC News and many other major news outlets were quick to deny these claims, even going as far as to fact-check Trump, which, according to the mainstream media, debunked Trump's claims.
However, we did find this CBS report from September 16, 2001 by Pablo Guzman on YouTube. He talked about the 9/11 celebrations in Jersey City too.
Most of you know that yesterday the FBI raided an apartment in Jersey City where two men lived who were pulled off a train in Texas and are now back in New York, being held in connection with Tuesday's attacks.
But YouTube seems to have taken down the other videos that might support Trump's claim, including a video Stan Scavino tweeted.
And Kovaleski himself reported on the celebrating happening back in 2001. On September 18, 2001, he wrote, quote, "In Jersey City, within hours of two jetliners plowing into the World Trade Center, law enforcement authorities detained and questioned a number of people who were allegedly seen celebrating the attacks and holding tailgate-style parties on rooftops while they watched the devastation on the other side of the river."
But this controversy all started after Trump called Kovaleski out. Kovaleski suddenly seemed to backtrack. He claimed, quote, "I certainly do not remember anyone saying that thousands or even hundreds of people were celebrating. That was not the case as best as I can remember," unquote.
But why would he retract his statement? When people on social media called him out, he tried to defend himself by saying there were not hundreds of people celebrating, although he did use the term tailgating and hinting to big parties, right? But instead of acknowledging that any celebration reportedly happened, reporters refused to let Trump be correct about any aspect. The media immediately debunked him and then attacked his character.
Why would they repeatedly do this, though? Is there some kind of agenda? I mean, just look at what CNN had to say about it.
Donald Trump facing new criticism for something he did on the campaign trail last night in South Carolina while defending his debunked claim that he saw thousands of Muslims celebrate the collapse of the Twin Towers here in New York. He appeared to mock a reporter with a disability. Take a look.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. This is 14 years ago. They didn't do a retraction.
That reporter he is talking about is Serge Kovaleski, who now works for the New York Times. As you can see right there, he suffers from a chronic condition that impairs movement of his arms. A Times spokesman says they find it outrageous that Trump would ridicule the man's appearance.
But let's take a closer look. Did Trump actually mock Kovaleski's disability? We do know that Trump is his own man. He makes his own facial expressions and he talks with his hands a lot, and that seems to be how he is.
When Trump flailed his hands around, it didn't seem that he was specifically trying to mock Kovaleski on his disability. What the media did was freeze the exact moment where Trump's hand was limp near his chest and then put this side by side with Kovaleski's photo.
All to prove that Trump was mocking him. But Trump also made similar hand motions when he mocked Ted Cruz.
Somebody said, that's amazing. Every single debate, you know, I heard Ted's a good debater. I said, he is a good debater, but he can't talk, okay? Bad talker. He's a good debater, bad talker. So he's over here. They asked him about waterboarding. They said, Senator Cruz, what do you think of waterboarding? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. You know, he didn't want to talk about waterboarding because too controversial. And I'm saying to myself, they're chopping off heads. He doesn't want to talk about waterboarding.
And also when talking about an army general in regards to ISIS. So it falls into a pattern of how Trump actually expresses his dislike of people's words on serious issues.
Why would the media freeze the exact moment Trump's hands was near his chest, just like Kovaleski's hand was, when Trump had made similar hand motions for others who weren't disabled?
The media didn't seem to care when he did the same hand motions when talking about Ted Cruz or the Army General. Regardless of how you feel about President Trump, you have to agree that this isn't right for the media to frame this situation to fit their narrative.
Exactly, and we've seen them do this many times. A good example would be when Trump suggested injecting a kind of disinfectant to help treat certain illnesses, if you know what I mean. The media jumped on him for even suggesting this, even though he did mention it in passing.
Yeah, instead of looking up what he was saying or discussing the effectiveness of UV light therapy or other treatments, which is what Trump was actually suggesting, the media just dragged what he said through the mud, which led people to flock to the internet to show themselves jokingly injecting bleach.
The media continues to create a divide between the people by doing things like this over and over. They are doing us all a huge disservice. It seems that instead of presenting the facts and allowing people to come to their own conclusions, they are trying to tell us how to think and what to think.
Again, regardless of how you feel about the president, we should all agree that it is wrong for the media to jump on everything that he says and does, and build a narrative around it, instead of just explaining to us what he was trying to say or keeping it in context. I mean, that's way less effort for them anyway.
So could Trump word things better? Yeah, I mean, he probably could, but still, that shouldn't give the media an excuse to control people's thoughts by misrepresenting what he says.
I mean, just have a look at Joe Biden, and we're not trying to take sides here. But it is true that Biden stumbles over his words and has a hard time finishing sentences, but the media never ever slams him for it.
Biden has even made borderline racist comments, and the media is silent about it or gives him a free pass. But they are never silent on claiming that Trump is racist. More on that later.
In 2018, there was the Migrant Caravan scandal. Thousands of people supposedly walked for hundreds of miles to reach the Mexican border just in time for the midterm election.
We should all ask ourselves, how did 4,000 people travel 20 to 30 miles a day, supposedly mostly on foot, without food, water, or shelter?
It would seem that this effort had to have been well funded. I mean, all these people needed to eat and drink every day, right?
The media would have us believe that all of these people really did walk 800 miles, mostly on foot, to the Mexico-American border, providing plenty of pictures for proof.
There are a few things to point out about these pictures. These people's clothes are always clean. The people themselves always look clean too. They don't look tired, and some pictures have emerged of people on their phones while riding on a bus, even charging their phones on a power strip.
Who was providing that power? Who was providing water for them to shower? Fox News actually provided some more proof on how these people were shuttled most of the way on buses.
Well, the migrant caravan is fake. You've been watching CNN, so you know that. Look at this graphic, quote, invasion, unquote, then the word myth on the screen. It's a myth! A pernicious one, too. Is it actually a myth? Well, filmmaker Ami Horowitz decided to find out himself. He went to Mexico looking for this fake caravan. He found a real caravan, and he filmed it. Here's part of what he found.
Despite the framing of the caravan as being full of women and children, the reality on the ground is quite different. Approximately 90 to 95% of the migrants were male. The major narrative being pushed by the press has been that the migrants are leaving Honduras because they are escaping extreme violence and that their lives are under constant threat, setting up the strategy that they would be able to enter the U.S. by asking for asylum. So I started by asking them a simple question. Why are you coming to America?
Bueno, voy buscando una mejor vida económica.
Vine a trabajar allí a Estados Unidos. Si podemos trabajar allá porque en Honduras no hay trabajo.
There's a massive logistical effort underway, akin to moving an army, and is clearly costing someone millions of dollars for the transportation, food, water, medicine, and services that are being provided for the members of the caravan. The Mexican government also seems to be sending police to escort the dozens of buses and trucks that are ferrying the migrants and supplies along the route to the next destination. Ever present among the thousands of migrants are workers of Pueblos Sin Fronteras, clad in black t-shirts and colored vests. Pueblos Sin Fronteras means people without borders. They are the ones that seem to be most involved in organizing and mobilizing this caravan. The organization, as the name implies, is looking to create a world without borders, which seems to be one of the reasons why they organized this caravan in the first place, to flout American sovereignty. While it does seem as the majority of these migrants are friendly and simply trying to make a better life for themselves and their families, there's an undeniable element of the migrants who are violent and dangerous. And many of the migrants know this, and some have experienced it.
En el viaje hemos recibido agresiones verbales, físicas.
It seems to me that there are leftist organizations that are using these migrants as a tool to push a certain political agenda, which includes the weakening of American sovereignty and our border security. And unfortunately, these migrants are going to be caught in the crossfire.
Ami Horowitz joins us tonight. That was really interesting. The thing that jumped out at me was how, as you said, well organized it was. Do we have any sense who's paying for this? I know we're not allowed to speculate, but do we know that answer?
We don't. We know, what we do know is this whole thing cost millions and millions of dollars. And the mainstream media, and there's so many layers to this onion to peel back, it's hard to know where to begin. But one of the lies, the fake news, if you will, that the mainstream media is trying to propagate is the fact that this is all this weird, this organic thing, and all the water and the food and the medicine all dropped from manna from heaven. It's baloney. It's all highly organized. It's paid for by a number of organizations. We don't know exactly where the money is coming from. We do know that Pueblo Sin Frontera, which is the main group which is organized this caravan, has a couple of front organizations in the United States. And the money is flowing from them to Pueblos Sin Fronteras. We know there are some leftist groups. I know it's forbidden to say that Soros is part of it, but Soros has in fact funded at least some of those groups in the past. So we don't know where the money is exactly coming from. We know it's not coming from Honduras.
So why would, I mean, it's such an interesting and obvious question. Who's paying for this? Why haven't other news organizations gotten to the bottom of this? You're one man. You're doing this independently. Why isn't NBC News or ABC or PBS, why aren't they on this?
Oh, come on. You know the answer to that. They don't want to get to the bottom of it. They have no interest politically in getting to the bottom of it. It's the same reason why when you see a photo in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or a video in CNN or the BBC or MSNBC, what do you see? You see the entire framing are women and children, when the reality is so far from the truth. 90 to 95% of all the people who are in this caravan are men, although I do apologize for assuming their gender.
They're liars. That's the answer. That's why they're not reporting it in New York, because they are liars. I mean, thank you for that. That was valuable and really interesting. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now, wherever you stand on the caravan issue and whether you believe the people marching deserve to come through the border is irrelevant. That's not what we're discussing in this episode.
We're simply pointing out that there were questions to be asked about how all of these people made it to the border in such a timely manner, and why they seem to appear happy and clean and sometimes on their phones when the media claimed otherwise so strongly.
The story was that by the time they made it to the border, they were denied entry, of course, and children were supposedly put into cages and separated from their families.
When in fact the Trump administration put a stop to that practice, and it was actually the Obama administration that built the cages we see in many of the pictures. And it was the Obama administration that put kids in cages at the border back in 2014.
President Obama separated the children. Those cages that were shown, I think they were very inappropriate. They were built by President Obama's administration, not by Trump. President Obama had child separation. Take a look. The press knows it. You know it. We all know it. I'm the one that stopped it. President Obama had child separation. Now, I'll tell you something. Once you don't have it, that's why you see many more people coming. They're coming like it's a picnic, because let's go to Disneyland. President Obama separated children. They had child separation. I was the one that changed it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, the media just used those same photos from the Obama era and passed them off as photos from the Trump administration. So it's safe to say that Obama had kids put in cages during his time as president, and the media was actually silent about it at that time.
So a photo that the media was silent about from the Obama era was used as a photo from the Trump era. And it's only now a huge deal? It doesn't make any sense. And whether you support Trump or you don't, or whether you support Obama or not, doesn't matter. The media shouldn't do things like this.
And it seems that the media went even further. Did they use staged photos of kids in cages as well? I mean, what is going on here? This wouldn't be the first time the media staged photos or set themselves up in such a way that made it look like the situation was worse than it was.
And don't forget about the major news wires, Reuters and AFP, who said that there are currently 100,000 children in immigrant-related custody, which violates international law. They were attacking Trump in the article, blaming him for the border crisis.
However, within a day, Reuters and AFP pulled the article and scrambled to have it deleted from all media outlets. It turns out they were using data from 2014, and of course, we all know who was president then.
But the real question is, why wouldn't they just rewrite it and say they were using old data and give us the correct numbers instead of frantically trying to delete the article everywhere?
Why is the media so afraid of showing Trump in a positive light? The border situation has been going on for many years. Past presidents have spoken out about securing the border, and in his first 3 years, President Trump did deport 800,000 people.
However, the media never compared Trump's numbers with anyone else's. In the first 3 years of Obama's presidency, he deported 2 million people. The media supported the past presidents, and Trump said basically the same things that all former presidents have said about border security. But the media is all over him about it. Why is that?
Regardless of political ideals or leaning left or right, why has the media supported decisions past presidents have made, but anything Trump does or says is front page news?
And it's never anything good. It's always negative when it comes to Trump. Why does the mainstream media in particular hate the president so much? Overall, there really doesn't seem to be any verifiable reason to hate him.
It started with a spear.
What was the whole story behind the spear? Its story is arguably the most mysterious.
Relics of Power. You've seen season 1.
So with the US in possession of Arma Christi items, how would the forces of darkness compete?
But the journey continues.
There was truth to Jesus and his teachings, and the bad guys knew it. So why then, if he was after all of these other relics of power, didn't he just steal this one?
I mean, why wouldn't Hitler want the crown of thorns?
The powers of the Ark are strong, but they also mirror those inside of us.
And that's why the covenant is so important. That's why we still teach it and talk about it.
Relics of Power, Season 2, premieres August 20th, only on edgeofwonder.tv.
In 2016, then candidate Trump's charitable foundation came under attack after alleged conflicts of interest. The Guardian reported that Trump agreed to shut down his foundation in response to the controversy.
The Guardian also reported, quote, The foundation also made a donation to a political group supporting Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, a longtime Trump backer, in violation of tax law. The president-elect has since paid $2,500 to the Internal Revenue Service over the donation.
However, the HuffPost revealed that this donation actually took place in 2013 before Trump was running for president. The Guardian article was misleading because it made it sound as if he made the donation in 2016 or a relevant time for him politically.
It does seem that the donation proved to be a violation of the IRS rules for tax-exempt nonprofits. So Trump did have to pay a $2,500 penalty.
Trump also let Pam Bondi use his Mar-a-Lago resort to hold a fundraiser in 2014 for her campaign when running for Attorney General in Florida. But this was also before Trump was running for president, so this really didn't have anything to do with Trump's presidential campaign whatsoever.
The Daily Wire shed more light on Trump fundraising scandals, reporting that New York State Justice Sally Ann Scarpola ruled that Trump put a fundraiser in 2016 to, quote, further Mr. Trump's political campaign. Trump was ordered to pay $2 million to charities as part of a settlement. Trump had this to say, quote, "I am the only person I know, perhaps the only person in history, who can give major money to charity, $19 million, charge no expense, and be attacked by the political hacks in New York State. No wonder why we are all leaving," unquote. He went on to say, quote, "Every penny of the $19 million raised by the Trump Foundation went to hundreds of great charitable causes with almost no expenses." He continued, quote, "The New York Attorney General is deliberately mischaracterizing this settlement for political purposes. In fact, the court rejected the Attorney General's frivolous request for statutory penalties, interest, and other damages," unquote. Trump finished with, quote, "We resolved the case with the understanding that all money previously in the foundation has gone to charity. I am therefore happy to donate $2 million to the following worthy charities: Army Emergency Relief, Children's Aid Society, City Meals on Wheels, Give an Hour, Martha's Table, United Negro College Fund, United Way of Capital Area, and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum." Trump also pointed out how it was not acknowledged that 100% of the money raised by his foundation was given to charities, and that the Clinton Foundation was not looked into like his foundation was. And it's worth noting that the Clinton Foundation has been riddled with scandals, but none of the mainstream media ever touches it. We will just name a few, and this is all according to the Daily Wire. When Hillary Clinton was sworn in as Secretary of State, she was required to sign a document that said she would keep the Clinton Foundation separate from the State Department. She did not follow through on that. The State Department under Hillary Clinton used the Clinton Foundation's quid pro quos with Russia. Peter Schweitzer, author of Clinton Cash, wrote in the Wall Street Journal stating that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, quote, corralled U.S. tech companies, including those who were donors to the Clinton Foundation, to provide funding to Skolkovo, which was dubbed Russia's version of Silicon Valley. He went on to say, Skolkovo returned their favor by having Russians connected to the Innovation City donate to the Clinton Foundation and gathering together 28 key partners, 17 of which made financial commitments to the Clinton Foundation totaling tens of millions of dollars, or sponsored speeches by Bill Clinton, unquote. The biggest problem with this was that Skolkovo was funded by the Russian government, which utilizes the Innovation City to enhance their military technology, which in turn steals classified information from the US. This is just some of the scandals involving the Clinton Foundation. However, this episode is not about them. If it were, we might need to make a few episodes, but in any case, we encourage all of you to look into this for yourselves. Yeah, definitely. But why can the Clintons use their foundation in just about any way they please, even while holding government positions? But the media never nails them for any of it, even though tons of organizations, officials, and alt media have called them out on it. This has involved real government corruption, and the media is silent on all of it. And why does the media seem to ignore many serious issues if they reflect a particular way on Trump? The media seems to focus a lot of energy on things that turn out to be misleading or even flat out false. But it's up to everyone to make up their own minds on this.
We wanted to save this topic for last since the race issue has been a big part of everything going on in 2020.
There's a lot of controversy over racial issues, and President Trump being called a racist by many people is one of those issues. But is he really racist? Well, let's look into it.
A big part of President Trump being called a racist revolved around the border issue, which we touched on earlier. The media said that Trump is building a border wall because he doesn't like Hispanics and wants to keep them out of America.
When it seems that Trump's border wall was supposed to be about slowing down the drug and human trafficking trades from Mexico and South America into the United States. And weirdly, anything related to human trafficking, the media is extra quiet about. And that begs the question, why is that?
We'll save that conversation for later because it's an important one and we need more time to cover it. So stay tuned for our human trafficking series.
Anyway, back to the race issue. Donald Trump has been a public figure for almost his entire adult life. With all the cancel culture stuff happening over the last few years, celebrities are now all apologizing for racist tweets they made years ago.
I think we should put racist tweets in quotes because a lot of times they're not, it seems, but I digress. Or they're apologizing for something they said on a TV show from about 10 or 20 years ago. Thinking about the Trump racism issue, have we ever actually seen anything emerge from Trump's past that has gotten him in trouble for racism? It actually doesn't appear so.
As much as the media gets on Trump for being a supposed racist, they can really only come up with things that he's been called racist for during his time as president. Why can't they find anything from his past if this is really part of his character?
Speaking of his past, let's take a look at a few things we found when we looked for ourselves.
There was an American Spectator article titled "When Trump Fought the Racist," which explained how Trump fought racism in South Florida after he bought the Mar-a-Lago resort.
In 1985, Donald Trump purchased the Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, Florida. At the time, other clubs in the area barred blacks and Jews from having memberships. Reports showed that Trump actually fought this.
He advertised his newly acquired club as a place that would accept anyone who could qualify regardless of race or religion. The town council actually imposed zoning restrictions to stop Trump from turning the Mar-a-Lago into a club.
This seemed to have been an attempt to keep the old South social order in Palm Beach, so Trump went head-to-head with the town council.
Apparently, as part of his strategy, Trump sent the city commissioners a copy of the Sidney Poitier movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which is about upper-class racism. That didn't work.
So instead, Trump filed a $100 million lawsuit. That seemed to have done the trick. Because of his groundbreaking example, other clubs in the area followed and eventually began accepting people of other races and religions.
Here's another good example of Trump's past in regards to race. Listen to what the famous Judge Joe Brown had to say about Trump being racist.
Is Trump a racist?
I don't think so. I've talked to a number of black entrepreneurs who back in the late 80s and 90s, early 90s, were trying to get financing. They couldn't. Somebody told them to go check with Donald Trump. So they come back and tell me they got a loan from Donald Trump. He gave them a term loan. Show up with the interest and the principal, one check. But they had to go see him personally. They independently relate this tale that when they saw him, he said, "This what you supposed to pay me? This our agreement?" I said, "Yeah." And then tore the check up, shook their hands, and congratulations. Now run your business.
And this was when?
This was back in the 90s. See, most people don't even know this. He had a sister. He was, every time you saw him back in the 90s, fine paper bag, brown, beautiful black model. He likes fine women. He didn't have any problem with dating a black woman, walking her down red carpets. So, I mean, she says he's not a racist. He just doesn't like many people, black or white. And he appreciates people who do stuff within their lane. Well, not stay in their lane, but where they choose to be. If they do it well, he admires them. Black, white, brown, red, yellow. Most people don't know this. He was the finance man behind Jesse Jackson's 2 runs for president.
Later in the video, the interviewer asked Joe Brown if he thought that black people were missing an opportunity with Trump. He agreed and said yes, he thought so.
Do you think black people are missing an opportunity with Trump?
Yo, yeah.
Also, don't forget that Trump dated Kara Young, a black model who said she never saw Trump being racist. Trump also freed black rapper A$AP Rocky from unfair prosecution in Sweden, and when he learned about a black man named Clyde Fraser Jr., who ran the Harlem Hoops tournament but was killed during the 9/11 attacks, Trump tracked down Clyde's family and donated money to keep the tournament going.
He also chose Katrina Pearson to be the national spokeswoman for his presidential campaign and invited Diamond and Silk to speak at a rally during the Trump campaign.
However, it seems that all the controversy surrounding Trump in the eyes of the media has made it really hard for people to see through it all and to see things clearly in terms of facts.
Ask yourself why Trump seems to have a long history in the public spotlight without any major controversy. I mean, yeah, he has some minor controversies like a lot of humans. I mean, people make mistakes, and he was a playboy for some part in his 20s. I make mistakes, Ben makes mistakes, all of you watching have probably made some mistakes. It's totally normal. It's how we learn.
Except for Chuck Norris, he never makes a mistake. I even heard that if...
I'm not disagreeing with that. I do not want the fury of Chuck Norris coming after me by saying he made a mistake.
Rumor is that if he spells a word wrong, they change it in the dictionary.
Right, anyway, moving on. Well, it would seem that people have always wanted Donald Trump to be our president. He's been asked many times over the years by TV show hosts like Letterman and Oprah if he'd ever consider running for president.
And what about the, are people trying to draft you to run for president up in New Hampshire?
Well, I guess a lot of people want to see this country...
Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
Even Larry King asked Trump on CNN if he'd run for president.
Is it true that you're going to go to New Hampshire in October at the invitation of Mike Dunbar, who's heading a group called Draft Donald Trump?
Well, I was asked about 3 or 4 weeks ago whether or not, by a very good friend of mine, whether or not I'd go to New Hampshire. That's turned out to be now a much bigger deal than I had ever anticipated. And perhaps, I don't know, I am going. I've made the commitment to go. I made the commitment about 3 weeks ago. And I will go, yes.
You will go, even though you realize now, in just stepping foot in that state, people are going to presume things.
Well, they can presume whatever they want. I have no intention of running for president, but I'd like the point to get across that we have a great country, but it's not going to be great for long if we're going to continue to lose $200 billion a year. You're going to get into the early 90s, 1990, 1991, and the whole thing's going to blow, because this country cannot continue to support Japan and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and many other countries that are much wealthier than we are. We're not a wealthy country. You can't be a wealthy country when you're losing the kind of money that we're losing.
We're a debtor country.
Why would these highly influential people continue to encourage Trump to run for president over the years if he were so bad? Why were the American people crying out for Trump to be our president?
He wouldn't have been asked so many times over the years if people had made it clear that they didn't want him for president. He's been in the public eye for decades. And for the most part, he's been adored by the general public. Think about all of the sitcom references to him alone.
The media sure seemed to like him over the years too, but as soon as he announced he was running for president, the attacks only then started coming, from the same people who had encouraged him to run for president for many years. Why is that?
The media has spent so much of their energy over the last 4.5 years telling us what seems to be misleading or sometimes even flat out made up information, all while completely ignoring things like scandals of the Clinton Foundation, Uranium One, human trafficking, and organ harvesting, just to name a few.
I think we can all put our political ideals aside and agree that the media should focus its energy on more pressing matters and report facts, not emotionally painted stories.
Right. And instead of focusing on a billionaire businessman tax returns, maybe we should focus on how some elected politicians who don't even own a business are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, when it is impossible to get that kind of money through their salary as an official?
An excellent question, Ben. Or instead of politicians, maybe we should focus on joining the Trump administration and the war they've declared on human trafficking, an issue everyone can get behind. Seems like instead of investigating this and reporting on what is truly happening, the media is attacking anyone and even silencing people for talking about it. Really makes you question why.
Speaking of which, join us next time on edgeofwonder.tv for part 2, where we'll get into how the media has been dead silent on human trafficking issues. We'll probably get into a few other things as well, like is there really a Trump-Ghislaine-Maxwell connection?
And stay tuned for an upcoming series that will be dedicated to nothing but human trafficking. Thank you all so much for watching. This is all we have time for today.
Yeah, sorry we're separated, but everything's still, New York is still a little bit crazy, so Rob and I are kind of doing this.
New York is really weird.
And I want to thank Bird's Eye View 2.0 for allowing me to use their studio to record this, so pretty cool.
All right.
Anyway, we love you guys, and until next time, we'll see you out
on the edge.